The topic that I want to go over today is using modern controls to enhance custom pages. The kind of scope of this is seeing how those two kind of technologies and the Power Platform combine and work really well together. So just a quick introduction about me. My name's Giles. I'm a solution architect at Bridgel, mainly focusing on Power Platform. I'm a bit of a Power Platform nerd, really. All things Power Platform is of interest to me. Particular interest in model-driven apps and how clients and customers can use them. I'm a big Lego fan. You can probably see the Lego sets behind me. Still kind of trying to figure out my next one to do. So any suggestions, put them in the chat. I'm also a big aviation enthusiast, so I'm not making Lego sets or spending time with the family. You'll probably catch me in my garden looking at what planes are flying into Glasgow. There's the don't know if any of you know your airplanes, but the big double-deck A380 flies in every so often. So I usually try and track that on the flight radar, and I'm out in my garden looking up like a bit of a numpty, but it's all good fun. I'm also bilingual as well, so I spent a good number of my years living in Spain, so I'm fluent in Spanish as well as English, obviously. So that's quite good, and I'd like to kind of look into languages and stuff too. All my details, LinkedIn, GitHub, and blog can be found with that QR code. If anyone's interested, please take a look. Always appreciate the support. So moving on to the agenda, I want to just cover kind of a bit of a background in custom pages, what they are, just for anyone who's not really used them before or is a bit unsure. We'll do the same with modern controls as well and see kind of what they're about. Some considerations about both too, what and when to use them, when not to. Then I've got some just kind of like some design tips and things that I follow when building out a custom page and using modern controls. And then I've got a demo. We'll see if it goes well. Always a bit kind of risky doing a demo, but we'll wait and see. So fingers crossed on that one. So starting off with custom pages, what are they? What do they do? Why should you care about them, really? So custom pages are kind of like a blank canvas in model-driven apps. For people who are a bit unsure about model-driven apps and what they do, they're kind of like a bring your data and we'll provide the interface type app. So you don't really need to do much in the way of like designing an interface, like if you use something like a Canvas app, for example. But a custom page kind of takes or moves away from that and gives you that customizability that you didn't have before. So they're pretty new as well. People on here probably know better than me, but I think they're maybe about a year or 2 years old tops. So they're pretty new to the scene, and they're pretty kind of important in being able to customize those experiences. So yeah, blank canvas. We can extend those out of the box experiences with custom pages because we're not limited to the same kind of forms and views that we're used to with model-driven apps. And we can bring in third-party data connectors as well. So we're no longer limited to Dataverse with custom pages. We can bring in SharePoint data, SQL data, anything really, because behind the scenes it's a Canvas app, and that's quite a good thing. You get the familiar Canvas designer that you'll probably be used to if you've worked with Canvas apps before, and that makes it really simple to set up in a low/no code way. Finally, we can pass parameters to these as well, and this is a really powerful kind of part of the product offering, is that with just a little bit of knowledge, you sometimes need to put in some JavaScript stuff, but it's well documented on Microsoft documentation. You can pass in like record parameters so that you can bring context-aware forms and experiences into these pages. So it makes a really kind of nice, neat, comprehensive package, really, within a model-driven app. But moving on to modern controls then and what they are. If anyone's like me and keeps up to date with Power Platform blogs and what's going on and always checking out the latest authoring versions and stuff, you'd have seen modern controls by now. That they're being pushed heavily by Microsoft, and they're a real welcome change and a breath of fresh air, particularly into Canvas apps and model-driven apps, just because they just modernize the whole experience. Whereas before you can see it on the screen there, those kind of horrible looking text inputs out of the box. We now get these really nice controls based off the Fluent 2 design system, which is Microsoft's kind of big push to kind of design within their apps. And if you do a search online for Fluent 2, you'll see there's a full kind of website dedicated to using Fluent 2 and what those controls consist of. And slowly but surely, these are being brought into Canvas apps, model-driven apps, custom pages. They're all kind of slowly but surely filtering their way down. I personally see that this is going to be the future of Power Apps. As we start wanting to create more beautiful, engaging experiences within the platform, having tools out of the box to allow us to do that without having to do much in the way of customization is definitely what I see as a future for this. There's a lot of controls that are currently general availability. You can see on that screen there that there's a few, and some of them are still in preview, quite a number of them. So use at your own risk for the ones that are in preview. I've not really found much of an issue with some of them, but others I have. Forms, for example, can be a bit sketchy. Combo boxes can sometimes play up a little bit. So use at your own risk. Generally, things like text input, though, I've found to be pretty reliable in that preview bucket. And this has been iterated upon constantly. If you keep up to date with the Power Platform blogs, you'll see that, I think near monthly they release a kind of blog update as to where they're at with it. And it's one of my favorite parts of the month within Power Platform is going in and seeing what's kind of coming with this stuff, because it's really interesting and brilliant seeing kind of where they're going with it. I think there was a blog released a few days ago around kind of some of where they're going with it. Things like modals and dialogues are going to be introduced soon by the sounds of it, an icon pack. So yeah, they're really investing heavily in this, and it's a really good kind of thing to kind of look into if you haven't already. And to mention it as well, alongside this is a new theming engine they've put in. They're looking at rebuilding the whole kind of way we deal with themes, and having out of the box themes is going to save us all loads of time, particularly on the Canvas app side. Model driven custom page side maybe not as much, but still interesting nonetheless. Okay, so moving on to some design tips, things that I tend to find when designing custom pages, just kind of general tidbits that I find when doing this stuff, really. First one's pretty obvious, but model-driven apps have a very specific look and feel that they don't deviate too much from that. You're always going to have a nav bar on the left. You're always going to have some sort of command bar at top, and then some sort of list or form view underneath that. They always follow that same kind of format and very familiar design standard guidelines. So as a developer, designing kind of to match that is probably pretty integral to a custom page, in my opinion, because you want to match that experience and make sure that you're providing something for end users that's really kind of consistent with that look and feel. By doing that, you can enhance user experience, adoption, all that good stuff that we all strive for when developing these great solutions. I try to use reusable templates for this kind of thing as well. When you pick up a custom page and you kind of have that kind of set design, it almost makes sense to reuse that kind of base template if you can across other areas. It just means that you can pick up the kind of important things like putting your lists or your forms in and doing that kind of stuff. So if you're able to kind of come up with a template to do that, then it just makes the most sense. And finally, the Creator Kit. That's a third-party PowerCat tool that you can download and install into your environment. But using that to complement custom pages is something I would recommend if you're able to do it. Things like command bars and that are really powerful in model-driven apps, and being able to bring that into something like a custom page really makes sense in my mind. So consider doing that. But if you are going to use the Creator Kit, just remember to turn on the code components button within the admin center, otherwise they won't work. So some more design tips then. things that I found using white smoke for background colors for a custom page to match kind of the other background colors within a model-driven app. You see on screen there, it's that hex code, and that seems to match in quite well with everything as a background color. Gaps and padding, I tend to use around 15 to 20 for the gaps and padding, and that seems to match quite well with all of the kind of existing design within a model-driven app. It gives you a kind of nice starter for 10, really. Drop shadows, if you're using containers, which you should be, making sure the containers have got the drop shadows, and generally the drop shadow set to regular seems to be kind of what I favor. It's just enough to give you that kind of perception of depth, but not too much that it's looking like it's jumping out the screen at you. Modals and dialogues, if you're using, wanting to inform a user and, look at maybe creating like a Fluent 2 dialogue or something, it's relatively straightforward to do, especially with the kind of container changes that were released kind of recently. Being able to do radiuses and drop shadows and things, it makes it quite easy to create a visually good looking dialogue that matches everything else in a model driven app. I wouldn't suggest you put too much effort into that, however, because that new control is maybe on the horizon within the modern controls for dialogues. So just bear that in mind. So I'm going to share my screen now and run through a bit of a demo, kind of how we can set this up, ways to approach it. I guess firstly, I'll just run into kind of like what you can create and how it can be done in pretty quick time frame. So I've just created this list page here, and it's pretty simple, to be honest. It's just a set template, and the idea is that it's just displaying a list of records using some of the modern controls and making use of them. Let's let that load up. So when we play this, what you can see is, a custom page with containers that have got, been styled suitably. It looks pretty native, and it looks fairly similar to what you'd get out of the box in a model-driven app, I'd say. It's not exactly there, but if you were to give that to an end user, they probably wouldn't notice the difference too much. So, you can spend all day trying to get this parity with a model-driven page, but you'd probably spend too much time doing that rather than trying to get kind of 80% there and it being okay. So what we see here is, we've made use of the modern command bar at the top to bring in that kind of command bar experience. And, what's really nice about that Creator Kit control is you can control everything about it. So you can control, what items are visible. You can control whether a user's got permissions to actually, click on that button. And it just provides a really nice out-of-the-box experience, obviously with the Creator Kit to do that. And it just kind of goes really well with the kind of theme of a custom page. So the first kind of modern control that I've added on this page is the kind of big one, which is this new table control. And yeah, it's really nice because it just gives you what you need out of the box really, really quick and easily. And what's nice about the kind of latest authoring versions of the table control is the fact that you can now get like automatic sorting, which is really nice. For the longest time, you just had this kind of header with this arrow and you couldn't do anything with it. So it's nice that they finally just given us that option to be able to kind of sort our records out of the box, which is really nice. And you can see there's a filter by that's grayed out. So maybe, hopefully in the future, they'll give us out of the box filtering. Just wait and see. Really hope they do, because it will save us all a lot of work. And yeah, I can come in here, add all my fields as required, and that's it done. Before we maybe had to use galleries or third-party apps like the Creator Kit table, but now I can just come into here and use this, and it looks good. If you remembered the old data table, it looked very much like an Excel spreadsheet type thing. It looked horrible, in my opinion. This just looks so fresh and responsive. It's a breath of fresh air into Power Apps. So the next thing I've got on this page here is just a combo box. The modern combo box. You can see I've added a little bit of style into it. So one of the most recent updates of modern controls was allowing things like font styling. and it just adds a little bit more kind of clear to a page being able to do that now. So, this is almost mimicking a view kind of selector that we get in a model-driven app. It's not perfect. The one out of the box is a lot nicer, but it gets us kind of most of the way there. I can filter my views based on what's selected, and my table is going to change, and it works really well. So, just adding a few controls to the screen, I've already got a pretty comprehensive experience within a custom page. So when we look at actually creating this page, I'm going to do this on the fly and see if I can kind of do this. So bear with me. So I come into my demo solution and create a new page. Hopefully the aim here is to demonstrate kind of how quick you can kind of just spin these things up, and I have a base template that you can then even like distribute to a team, or start using those modern controls on to really kind of excel how you develop model-driven apps. So and probably to preface this, don't follow what I do, because I'm not gonna probably rename the controls or do things probably the exact right way, but it's just a good demonstration to show you how quick you could potentially do this. So if we look at the background color here, I'm just going to change that to white smoke to begin with, if it lets me. Still loading. Okay, once that's loading, we'll add in a container. For those of you that haven't used containers yet, seriously look into them. They're, allow for that responsiveness. It saves you having to do like pixel perfect drag and drop in. It's more probably akin to, what you do with like HTML and that kind of CSS style stuff, but in a bit more of a friendlier approach in a Power Apps way. So it's quite nice. And the bar doesn't work. It worked earlier when I was rehearsing this. So let's refresh and see. Yeah, I think we're good now. Just changing the background color to match what would be on a model-driven app. Add in my kind of base kind of root container, if you want to call it that, and just formatting that appropriately. So making sure it's kind of stretching the width and the height of the screen, so that anything I put in there is going to just respond as required when I add it in. So if I do that, and because this is a root container, I just want to remove the radius and the drop shadow, because I don't want that for this one. We'll name it container root as well, just for clarity. So within here, let's start adding our kind of sections that we'd want in a model-driven app or a custom page. I'm going to add another vertical container, and this will be my kind of command bar one. So within here, I'm just going to turn off flexible height, because I always want it to be that same height. If you're working with like mobile responsiveness, you probably want to tweak this a little bit more than I am here, but again, gives you a good idea for a kind of starter. I'm going to set that to 50. I'm going to set the color to white, and the border radius to 5, drop shadow to regular. And that's the first part there. You'll notice it's right at the top, so it doesn't look particularly enticing or anything at the minute. So I think if we go back to a root container, I'm going to add some gaps in here and some padding as well, and it should start to kind of look a lot nicer when I do this. Yeah, there we go. So we've got that kind of command bar header there now. And if I add another one in, at this point, you're either wanting to add in usually either maybe like a header for a form, or maybe just that kind of big kind of main container for a list. So in this case, I'll just add in that big container for a list. Again, same thing, just changing the drop shadow, radius, color. Really simple things, but just like that, I've already got a nice kind of layout that I can use within a custom page. And I can come into here now and say, okay, I want to add in some of my modern controls, but what you notice is I can't do it just now. I need to enable that within the settings first and foremost. So I'm coming into general and down to modern controls and themes. This might be in a different place for you if you're on a different authoring version. It used to be in upcoming features, but they've moved over into general recently. So something to keep an eye on if you've not used them before. And then we'll just get rid of that nice little coach mark. And then within here, I'm going to add my table in. And I want that to span the entirety of that main kind of container section there. So I'm just going to stretch it and set it to flexible height. And let's add in the accounts table just so we can actually see that there's fields there as well. And there we go. And like that, we're pretty much halfway there for a decent template. Obviously when you're designing that, you're maybe not using the accounts table because we get out of the box anyway, but you get the idea. We can start to build something really, really quickly and easily here. And then if I wanted to add in additional things like the view switcher, I can just come in and start playing around with my modern controls now. And there's quite a lot of different ones to go through and choose from. But my advice is if you're looking at the modern controls, just play around with them, get a blank canvas first and foremost, and just add them all to the screen, see what the properties are, see what they do. They're not all at feature parity yet with the old controls, but they're really making strides and bringing them together. So yeah, just play around with them and see what they can do. The modern table, for example, you can see there's a lot of properties there now. Up until even just before Christmas, there was maybe like not even half of that stuff there. So being able to see that progress as you go is really, really good. And if I just, for sake of completeness, add in the command bar here, hopefully this will work. I've got the creator kit already installed, so I'm just going to add a new code component. Pick up the command bar. And then I'm just going to add it to here. And for the sake of quickness, I've got something that I stored earlier, which is the table items that I want, which I took from the documentation. And then I'm just going to change the height of this to, let's say, 40, and I'm just going to stretch that. And just like that, we've got a command bar in there. Still looks a little bit odd, so I think we just need to change the padding. I'll add some padding in, and same with the top as well. Oh, too much. I think if I do this, there we go. I think, yeah, good. Now we've got a command bar, a table, and we can start doing some wiring up to get everything kind of connected together. And using a combination of these controls, modern controls for starting to create forms. You can see text input, all of that kind of stuff, and then wiring that up with everything else that we need. It's all there, and we can create these experiences that just look a lot more native than if we use maybe the classic controls. I guess the only other thing to kind of mention as I wrap up the demo is when you look at like an actual model driven app, you've got this toggle now for the new look, and a lot of the custom page stuff that I've shown is kind of designed with that new look in mind, because that's using the Fluent 2 design system as well. So just something to bear in mind if you're still using that classic look, you might not find the modern controller applicable because they match very much this kind of theme and tone, whereas the classic ones don't. Okay, so yeah, hopefully kind of shows how kind of quickly we can start building, or at least templating a custom page. Nothing revolutionary there, but hopefully kind of some nice tips and tricks to kind of get started and build things in a bit more meaningful way. So I'll stop sharing my screen there. I think I'll reshare my slides. And all the way back here. So yeah, and then just to wrap up, always funny just to include a meme, isn't it, these days? So hopefully you can see that. Is it I don't see it. Oh well, it's not shown for some reason. I can see it on my screen, which is odd. Is it white for everyone else? The white screen,
yeah.
That's odd. That's really odd.
Oh.
Anyway, I had a insert funny meme here on this page. So, and then my last two slides are just around saying thank you to Sarah for letting me speak, and then just opening up for Q&A and just discussion and conversation, really. So again, thanks everyone for bearing with me.
Thanks, Josh. That was really good. Good demo as well. Pretty seamless. Has anyone got any questions, comments?
I put a question in the Q&A. I said, as far as templates are concerned, do you have any JavaScript snippets that you often use?
Yes, it's just so two approaches that I've taken when it comes to putting some JavaScript to pass parameters and ping open dialogues, for example, is I always find that just the Microsoft examples work really well as a really quick way to do it. Uses JavaScript though, which it maybe isn't the most recommended approach, with TypeScript being the kind of preferred one. Another one is within the community. There's I think it was Benedict Bergman and Sarah Laverquist. I probably said that wrong, but they came up with some really nice way to kind of reuse JavaScript to open like loads of different types of pages. So rather than having to create a JavaScript web resource for every single one, it's just the one web resource, and you can feed that to any page that you want to open or feed parameters to instead. So recommend you check that out if you get a chance. They usually post on LinkedIn and stuff, and they both got good blogs, so check them out too.
Cool, thank you.
Is there anyone else with any comments? A few cameras on there. I'm not sure if anyone has anything to add, any tips or questions.
I don't have a question, but just to say thanks, Josh. That was awesome.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. That was awesome, as expected. Really appreciate it, and appreciate everyone's time for turning up as well today.
I think everyone's eager to go off and try it now.
Yeah, I can give it a go.
Hope so.
Bye. Okay, well, have a lovely evening, everybody, and hope to see you all soon.
Thanks
a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.